Last episode we implemented the BuyView model and the BuyView. We finished up the BuyView model, but we left this BuyView in a pretty raw state. So in this episode we're going to focus on cleaning this up a little bit and just making it look better. Real quick before we get started, so I recently got a comment from a wonderful viewer who suggested that I create branches in GitHub that show all the code for specific parts of this series. So what I've done is now if you click on the branches in the GitHub repository, there's going to be a branch for part 11, and what this is going to show is the state of the repository at the end of part 11. So basically the end of this episode. And I'm going to try and do this for each part in the future. So let's take a look at where we are right now. So we can search for a stock. Let's type in T for AT&T, and then we'll search for it. It fills in this price per share, and one thing you note is whenever this text box changes up here, it automatically changes it down here in this search result box. And I don't entirely like that because now, say I type in AAPL for Apple, it shows that Apple is $28.47 because that is what it showed for AT&T. So since this text box and this text block are tied together, our data goes out of sync. So we're going to have to fix that because I do not entirely like that. So we can search, it shows everything. Another thing I noticed is, say we type in the price per share, or the shares to buy, it calculates it, but then let's say we go back and search for T, and then it doesn't update this to match this calculation. So that's another thing we're going to have to fix. And then, just looking at this, these buttons are kind of nasty looking, and we also have a double border right here because this rectangle has a border to the right and this rectangle has a border to the left, so they overlap and it's a double border, and it doesn't look too nice. So we're going to have to fix those things, and when we fix them, it's going to be the most beautiful view ever. So the first thing I want to do is fix this view model stuff where these two are tied together, and also fix this calculated property for whenever we search for a different stock. So let's go ahead and go into our BuyView model, and right now we have symbol, and that is what's tied to this text box that we search for, or that we use to search for a symbol. So what I'm going to do instead is create a new property. This will be another prop change, and we're going to call this search result symbol. And what we're going to do with this is in our BuyView, instead of our text block right here binding the symbol, which is what our text box is binded to, we're going to instead bind to search result symbol. So now what we're going to have to do is whenever we actually execute the search, we want to set the search result symbol to the symbol that we're searching for. And that is going to be done in the search symbol command. So this command executes when we press that search button, and what we're going to want to do here is use our view model and set the search result symbol to the symbol that we are searching for. So now let's see this in action. That should be all we have to do. So we'll head over to buy, we'll type in T, and as you can see it doesn't update, but let's put a breakpoint right here. We'll press search, and now we're going to set search result symbol to the symbol that we're searching for. And now if we continue on that, there we go, we get T. And actually one last thing I want to do, now that we can do this, since we have a property pretty much dedicated to the search result, we can make this uppercase, because I think I like that better. Usually when you think about stock symbols, they're usually uppercase, so we're going to stick with that tradition. And there we go. Okay, so now let's go back to our BuyView. And the other thing that we were talking about is the borders. So we have this double border going down the middle between these two, and it just doesn't look good because it's inconsistent with the other borders. So basically this is our right rectangle, and what I want to do is get rid of the border on the left side. So that's this first one. It's going to have a border thickness of 0, and as you can see, now we no longer have this double border, and our left rectangle is responsible for having this separator right here. So that looks a lot better. Another thing I want to do is border brush, instead of black, let's go for gray. Make it look a little bit cleaner. There we go, that's a nice touch. And let's actually get some corner radius in here too. So I think what we're going to have to do, this is going to be a little bit weird because we want this corner radius and this corner radius, but we don't want this one and this one. And that goes the same for this right rectangle as well. We want this corner radius and this corner radius, but we don't want these two. So to do that, we're going to have to do some experimenting. I think, so we did these middle two values, and I assume it goes like top left, top right, bottom left. So we got that well. Let's go ahead and add that to this one up here. So let's see if we were thinking the right thing. Oh, well, we just got to do the opposite of this. So let's look at that. Okay, so top left, then top right 0, bottom right 0, and bottom left 3. So now we're rounded on all 4 of these sides. So that looks a lot nicer. And another thing that we need to do is we need to hide this entire panel right here if nothing is searched for. So to do that, we're going to have to use a trigger. So let's take a look at where this trigger is going to go. This WrapPanel right here is the entire control for both of these panels. So what we want to do is hide this WrapPanel if nothing has been searched for. So to do that, we're going to have to set a style on this WrapPanel. And we'll just do the typical things for styles. Set the target type as a WrapPanel. And now inside the style, all we're going to have is a trigger. So let's set up our triggers, and this is going to be a data trigger. So with a data trigger, what you do is you bind to something. So in this case, we're going to be binding to our view model. And then inside the data trigger, you set what you want the control to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to bind to, we're going to set up a binding to the search results symbol. And then if the value of that binding is just nothing, so that means nothing has been searched for, what we're going to do is we're going to set the visibility on this entire panel to collapsed. And thinking about this right now, this isn't going to work because by default strings are null. So what we're going to have to do is set a default value on the search results symbol to string.empty. So now on this BuyView, when we load up, it's going to check this binding. It's going to look at search results symbol. It's going to see the value is indeed string.empty, empty string. So then it's going to collapse this entire WrapPanel until the search results symbol actually has a value. Then it'll automatically show it. So let's see that in action. And I think that's actually one of the biggest things that this view needs to do. So this is a nice addition. So now as you can see, we got nothing. But if we search for Apple, and there we go, it shows it. And we have some alignment things going on here. We're doing so much testing with this view and seeing so many things that need to be fixed. I think that goes right here, so this needs to be centered. There we go, okay. We'll probably find a lot more things like that as we go along, and we should be able to easily fix them. And another thing, I think I want more margin on the top between our panels. That looks better. So now we got some layout things looking good. We have a pretty dynamic view. If nothing is being searched for, it won't show anything. And what was another thing that we wanted to do on our list? I think it was with the calculated value. So if we change this, it doesn't update this. And that's a pretty easy fix. So if we go to our BuyViewModel, basically if our search result changes, we also want to update this total price property. So we're going to have to call on property changed for total price. And then the UI will take a look at this calculated value again and display the new total price. So let's go ahead and see that in action. So let's go ahead and type in T. We'll type in 5. It shows 142, but then if we switch to Apple, it doesn't automatically update it. Why does it do that? Oh, I see. We don't actually want this on the search result symbol. We actually want this on the stock price, which makes more sense because if we look at our total price calculated value, it depends on stock price and shares to buy. So obviously, we want this on property changed to go on the stock price because that's what's important for that calculated value. So let's go ahead and try that again. So type in T, do 5, and we'll type in Apple, and there we go, it updates. So that is all good. Now I think the last thing I want to do is fix some of these styles on these controls. So as you can see, we have this button. It's pretty ugly. It's just a regular like Windows button. And then these text boxes could also use some rounded corners to look a little bit nicer. So what we're going to do is add some custom styles, custom default styles for buttons and text boxes. And then we're going to be able to use those throughout our entire application pretty seamlessly. So to do that, let's head into our styles, common.xaml. That's where we have defined all of our default stuff for our styling. So it makes sense to put our default styles for text boxes and buttons in this resource dictionary. So first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and do the text box. So put a little comment there, and we're going to create a style, and target type is going to be text box. We are styling text boxes, and we don't provide a key like we did for this because we want this to be the default style for text boxes. So if you don't provide a key, it'll automatically apply this style to all text boxes. So what we want to do for our default text box style is we just want some simple corner radius. So wouldn't it be really nice if we could set a property called corner radius? But we can't. So what we have to do instead is redefine the template for a text box and provide our own border so that we can set a corner radius, and then all text boxes will have the corner radius. So to do that, the property that we're going to set is the template, and then inside here we have to use setter.value so that we can actually put a control template inside of here. So let's go ahead and create this control template, and the target type is going to be a text box, obviously to just match the style. And now we're inside this control template, and what this is going to do is anything that we put inside of here is going to be shown when a text box is used as a control. So we can really put anything in here. You could put some kind of grid, you can put a text block, you can put a scroll view, anything you want. So in our case, we're going to start off by creating a border because that's our main goal. We want a border with rounded corners. So the thickness for this border is just going to be 1. The border brush, we're going to do gray, be consistent with everything else we've done. And then the corner radius finally, we're just going to go with a humble 3. So now inside of here, it's going to be a little bit surprising what we do, but all we need to do is put a scroll viewer that is named part content host. So what the heck are we doing here? Well, if you guys have watched my custom control series, you might see part and understand that this is simply a template part. So what that means is that the text box, think about text box and WPF, a text box is just a class. So the text box class is going to receive the style, and it's going to take a look at the control template. It has a method called like onApplyTemplate, and then when that method gets called, it's going to take a look at the template that gets applied to the text box, and it's going to look for a part named part content host. So it's important that this is named correctly. So then that text box class is going to see that it has this part content host, and it's going to fill the scroll viewer with all the content that a regular text box has. So all you really need to know is that if you name this part content host, it's going to have the regular stuff. It's just going to have the content of the text box inside of it. So now let's go ahead and test this out, and we should see everything that we want to see. And there we go, we got our rounded corners, so that looks pretty nice. You can type it in, it shows everything we want, and all is good. I think I'm looking pretty closely at this, and that cursor is not vertically aligned, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a property right here. Vertical, I think content alignment is what we want, and we're going to make it center. Alright, yeah, it's actually centered now. It was like slightly off, but I can tell that did make a difference, so that looks better. Okay, so also we're going to do a search here, and as you can see, this text box also has the rounded corners. So our text box style is looking pretty good right now, and I think that's all we're going to do with it at this time. So another thing that we wanted to do is have some nicer looking buttons. So what we're going to do is put another comment right here. We'll call this buttons, and we're going to define another style, and this time the target type is going to be button. Again, no key, because we want it to be the default. So what we're going to do for buttons is we are going to have to redefine the template, but we also are going to set some properties as well. So the first thing I want to do is I want the backgrounds to be this static resource brush primary 2, which I think is the darker green. Might be the lighter one, so we might have to play around with that. And then I want the foreground, so I want the text to be white, so we get a nice little contrast right there. Another thing I like to do with buttons is I like to give them a cursor of hand, so it's like a little pointer. And then I think with that, that's probably all we're going to do for just regular properties. And let's take a look at how that looks right now, because I know we are going to have to redefine the template, unfortunately, and there's a reason for that. So as you can see, we have this basic button. It doesn't look too bad. We could add some more padding. We can actually add corner radius onto buttons, I think. Can you? I'm actually not entirely sure. No, you can. Okay, so we will have to redefine the template just to get that. But another reason that we're going to have to redefine the template is that whenever you hover over it, it automatically shows this, like, it automatically highlights it with this blue. And I don't like that, and there's really no way to effectively get rid of that without redefining the template. So it's kind of good to just redefine the template. So let's go ahead and actually do that. And again, it takes a little bit more work, but some templates can get out of hand. These templates aren't too difficult. So let's do a template again. Provide a value in here. And we're going to do another control template, and the target type this time is going to be a button, of course. And we're going to start off the same way with a border, because we want to have those rounded edges. So what we're going to do is, I'm actually not going to have a brush or a thickness for the border. I'm just using the border for corner radius. That's all we're going to provide here. And then inside this border, a cool thing about buttons is you can just provide a content presenter, and that'll show the content for the button. Now another thing I want to do for this button actually is whenever you hover over it, I want it to show the other, I think, yeah, this was the darker color, so whenever you hover over it, I wanted to show the light green. So to do that, we're going to have a trigger down here, and this is going to be a regular trigger. So this is different from a data trigger. When you have a data trigger, you're typically setting up a binding to like a view model, but when you just have a regular trigger, you're going to use property, and you're going to point it to a property on the button. So on this button, I want to point to is mouse over, or not really point to, but listen to it. And whenever is mouse over is true, what I want to do is set the background to be static resource brush primary 1. So that'll give like a hover effect. Whenever you hover over it, it'll turn to this light green. And I think that's all we're going to do for our buttons. Let's go ahead and take a look at how this looks so far. And it's actually nowhere. Oh, okay. So as you can see, good thing we set the cursor as hand, because the button is actually there. It's just that when we redefine this template, we're not telling the border to have this background that we have set. So what we have to do down here is we have to set the background of this border, and we're going to put a template binding in here, and we're going to be binding to the background on the element that this control template is applied to. So that's what template binding does. You're going to have access to all of these properties because that is the control that this template is being applied to. So now if we take a look at this, as you can see, we have the correct backgrounds. We also have the hover background, and we're also not seeing that blue highlight that the default buttons have that we just didn't like. So another thing that we need to do with our buttons is add a little bit of padding in there. And to do that, let's set this property up here so that all of our buttons have the same padding. And we'll set the value. We'll do 10 left, right, and 5 top, bottom. So now let's take a look at how that looks, and as you can see, it does nothing. So why did it do nothing? Same thing with this background. So what we have to do is we have to set our padding here to be that template binding to the padding that we have defined on this button element. And there we go. As you can see, it shows the correct padding. And while we're here, we might as well do more, so we can do margin as well. Template binding margin, and there we go. So that's pretty much our button style. If we search for a stock, as you can see, our buy button also has the button style, but our buy button's a little bit messed up, so it's not horizontally aligned. So I think what I'm going to do, our default button is going to have horizontal alignment center. So it's not always stretched out, and there we go. That looks a lot better. So I think we've checked off everything that we want to do for this view. Now I think one other thing that I was looking at is if we bring up our simple trader, we haven't gotten into this yet, but we will eventually once we set up user accounts so we can easily get this information. So we're still just focusing on this, and all that we're really missing is the stock information, which we'll get eventually from the API. We don't currently have that information on hand, but right now, as you can see, this element, or this panel right here, is a lot smaller than this one on the right, so our left side needs to be a little bit bigger. So to do that, I was thinking about actually changing our layout a little bit. So what I want to do is just close this out because I think we're done with common styles for now, and go back to our BuyView. Right now we're using a WrapPanel and just putting these two borders, the left border and the right border, side by side. But I think what I want to do instead is switch this to a grid, and then if we use a grid, we can use star widths. So with star widths, they're kind of like percentages. So what we'd be able to do is give this left side, like, say 33%, and this right side like 66%, so like 1/3, 2/3, rather than what we're showing now where it's like auto width and auto width. So we don't really have full control over how wide these are, because as you can see, if we type in Apple, it does make it wider, so it's kind of dependent on the content, and I don't really want it to be dependent on the content. I want it to be consistent, Because then another thing, whenever we switch stocks, it's not going to grow and shrink, which is kind of weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to not use a wrap panel, and we're going to use a grid instead. So inside here, we're going to have to change the style, change the target type, and that should all still work. So our grid is going to have 2 column definitions, and the width of the first column is going to be star, and the width of the second column is going to be 2 star. So what this means is that, so basically what this means is there's a total of 3 stars. So we have 2 stars down here and 1 star up here. So that's 3 stars total, okay? Now each star is going to have the same amount of width, because that's how stars work. They all have the same amount of width. So if this has 1 star, that is 1/3 of our stars, and this has 2 stars, so that's 2/3 of our stars. So we're getting that proportion that we really want. So let's take a look at that, and that is not what we want because we have to actually assign these to the correct columns, like that. And that is still not what we want, and oh, it's because we're horizontally aligning center, which we don't want to do right now. So there we go. As you can see, this has 1/3 and this has 2/3, and we have more horizontal alignment issues. So let's go back down here and let's horizontally align this stack panel, I think, as center. And there we go, that's better. Now, since we are no longer horizontally aligning this entire panel as center, we should go ahead and set a max width on it so that it doesn't take up the entire screen. So what we're going to do for that is just put that on our grid. The max width, we'll go with 600 maybe 500. I think that's good. So yeah, this view is definitely looking a lot better. I think it's still a little bit weird over here because we don't have a lot of content on this side right now. Maybe we could make this symbol bigger. Maybe later. We'll see once we get more content. We'll play around with it. But I think another thing I want to do is this is like a big gap right here. So let's make that 5 instead. I mean, it's really not a big deal. I'm just being a perfectionist. And then maybe we could make this buy button a little bit bigger. So I think to do that, I'm actually just going to set the font size to be larger. We'll go for maybe like a 24. I think I like that. I'm gonna stick with that. Maybe we could set a width as well, or add more left-right padding. So let's stick with 5 top bottom, or 5 top bottom second. So what I want on the left and right, maybe like 20. I think that's good. I like big. Like, this is the most important button on the view, so I want it to be big. And I think that's all that is left for the BuyView. Now, one thing I would notice when I was playing around with this is that eventually, if you make this too short, it's going to hide stuff and there's no scroll bar. So to fix that, what we're actually going to do is add a scroll viewer to our entire, to basically the root of the application. So right up here, it's going to go right on our layout. So we have our navigation bar and then we have the content of the page. So what we're going to do is put the content of the page inside of a scroll viewer. So let's move that to grid 1, and vertical scroll bar visibility, we'll make that auto so that it shows and hides, or it only shows whenever it needs to be shown. And then horizontal, we're going to actually disable that for now. And then let's go ahead and grab this content and put it into the scroll viewer. So now, we can also get rid of this grid.row1 because it's no longer in this grid. And now let's actually go back to our BuyView and run this, because I don't actually think it's going to work. I think we have to make one more adjustment. So we click on buy, we'll search for something, and okay, it does work. I don't like how this goes all the way to the bottom, so I think we're going to make this auto instead. There we go, that looks a lot better. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for our BuyView improvements. So we updated this search symbol so that these two text boxes and text blocks are not tied together, and it only updates this after you search. We created this dynamic view so that if you haven't searched for a stock yet, it's not actually going to show anything. It's not going to show this panel until you search. We also fixed some alignment things that we had everywhere, and then we added some default control styles for text boxes and buttons, which look a lot nicer. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, criticisms, concerns, or just overall comments, be sure to leave them below in the comments section. But other than that, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like or subscribe for more. Thank you.